Good morning, fifth grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our novel, Homer P. Fig. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, have you ever asked an adult for advice when trying to make a hard decision? Describe the situation and the outcome. Did you take the adult's advice? Why or why not? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, how does Mr. Brewster's conversation with Homer at the end of the chapter impact Homer? Our vocabulary words for today are privy, and that is like an outhouse or an outside toilet. So in the time that our text takes place, there weren't indoor toilets. So they were only outhouses or outdoor toilets that were basically like a hole in the ground because you couldn't flush them. And they were called privies. The second word is influence, and that's when your opinion or what you say changes the way what someone else believes or what someone else says. Okay, so you would draw a line to this picture because this bluebird is influencing the yellow birds. They are following the bluebird. She's influencing them. And then the third one is murmur, which is to whisper or to speak in a low voice. So this would be an example of murmur. Shouting would be the opposite. Go ahead and turn the page, and we are in our text in chapter 11 on page 55. All right, and as we're reading, we're going to use our CSPS strategy. There's a whole other world in Mr. Brewster's basement. So we'll stop right here because it's been a while. Remember, Mr. Brewster took Homer to go see the mines, and he basically told Homer that he was a station on the Underground Railroad. And so Homer knows that he is hiding slaves, but he doesn't know where they are. And then Mr. Brewster takes him down to the basement. So that's where we are now. There's a whole other world in Mr. Brewster's basement. Must be 20 people hiding down there and 2 babies wrapped in blankets. 2 or 3 families all on the run looking to find a new life. On the run all the way from Maryland with slave catchers dogging their trail. The fugitives look thin and hungry and scared. They jump at every sound from above. They squeak the squeak of the floor when Miss Bean walks across the kitchen, a window rattling in the wind, a sad cooing of a mourning dove up in the eaves. Every noise makes them nervous and fearful. And if we stop right there, we have information about our characters. And so in box 1A, we would write, Mr. Brewster showed Homer where he was hiding the runaway slaves in his house. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 1B. And for our evidence from the text would be this sentence on page 55. Must be 20 people hiding down there and 2 babies wrapped in blankets. 2 or 3 families all on the run looking to find a new life. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the bottom of page 55. Mr. Brewster says that fear is something slaves carry with them, and they won't be rid of it until they're safe across the border in Canada with nobody to snatch them back. Oh my goodness. Some of these folks have escaped more than once, only to be seized by slave catchers and taken back. Makes it worse for this particular group because of their brave conductor, Samuel Reed, turn the page, vanished into thin air. They figured if it can happen to him, it can happen to them. If Stink and Smelt have their way, it will. All I do is offer shelter for a night or two, Mr. Brewster explains. The real work, the dangerous work, is done by the likes of Mr. Reed. The basement is fixed up real nice with rugs on the floor and rows of sturdy bunks and plenty of food and special baffles to keep lantern light from shining out the basement windows. It's way better than the barn where me and Harold live, but no matter how nice Mr. Brewster made the place, it's still kind of a dungeon, even if there are no padlocks and chains. You can feel it in the air, the people wanting to get out, to be free of this place, or any place where they got to be afraid. And right here we have more information about the setting. And so in box 2A we would write, the runaway slaves are located in the basement of Mr. Brewster's house, which has been fixed up to make the runaway slaves more comfortable. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we will write down this sentence on page 56 that says, the basement was fixed up real nice with rugs on the floor and rows of sturdy bunks and plenty of food and special baffles to keep the lantern light from shining out of the basement windows. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're looking for the problem. We're in the middle of page 56. I would have these poor folks in my own house as honored guests, but there are many who would burn us out if we did so, Mr. Brewster said, bringing me up out of the basement. Burn us to the ground they would. Do you think runaway slaves are fearful? Their fear is nothing to the fear the white man has of the black. Abolitionists who preach against slavery will not let colored worshipers sit with whites in their churches. They think it unclean that light and dark should mix. How will they get where they're going, I ask. Same way they got here, he says, on foot and wagons, but mostly on foot. With slave catchers lurking, they must travel at night under the cover of darkness, especially on cloudy and moonless nights. Like this evening, for example. He doesn't say so exactly, but he means the slaves will be on the move tonight. What should I do? I ask him. Mr. Brewster sets me down in the kitchen where Miss Bean has put out steaming plates of beef and potatoes slathered in gravy. So we'll stop right there because we have information about our problem. In box 3A, we would write, since Homer has met the slaves, he really does not want to tell Smelt the truth. He also does not want to die. He is conflicted about the decision he's going to make. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 3B. And for the quote, we would write down, what should I do? I ask him. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading to figure out what Homer does. Mr. Brewster sets me down in the kitchen where Mrs. Bean has put some steaming plates of beef and potatoes slathered in gravy. Thee must do whatever is true to thee, he says. It is not for me to force a thing upon thee, or to make thee believe as I believe. I never had a plate of food in my life. Squint wasn't much for plates, for that matter. But what I saw in the basement has killed my appetite. Men and women and children and babies all running for those who would chain them up and buy them and sell them like cattle. Gets me thinking how much I hated it when Squintin Leach locked us up, or whipped us with his belt, or sold Harold into the army like he was something Squint owned. Get a gun, I urge Mr. Brewster. He shakes his great white beard. That I cannot do. I'm sworn to peace. Miss Bean, I say, tell him to get a gun. Miss Bean chuckles and gives me a sad smile. Gave up on that years ago, she says. He will not stir from his beliefs. Turn the page. If you won't get a gun, then tell me what to do, I ask, pleading. He sighs so deep it almost makes the words rattle. Thee must decide, he says again. But I will say this much. It all boils down to this. A person has only two options in life, to do something or to do nothing. What does that supposed to mean? It means that if thee do nothing, thee may stay in this house. Thee will be safe and cared for and will never go hungry. Miss Bean will see to that. Or thee can do something. Something to help Mr. Smelt and his confederates, or something to help those who escape their chains. This isn't fair, Mrs. Bean admonishes him, shaking her gray ladle. He's just a boy, and a scrawny one at that. I know, says Mr. Brewster, sounding regretful, but boys are fighting this cruel war. Boys are enslaved, and boys own slaves. None may escape. All must decide. If you won't get a gun, then give me one, I said, begging. There are no guns in this house, not for thy purpose. I shake my head. Comes to me that Jebediah Brewster is crazy, and that's like God himself being crazy. As crazy as plagues and pestilence, as crazy as the tree that fell on my father and my dear mother dying so young, and Squint being so mean. I can't stand another minute of this with all the questions in my head trying to decide things that are better left to God and Mr. Brewster. Where are you going? Miss Bean calls out when I get up from the table. What are you going to do? But I'm running out the door without an answer. Running into the sooty blue darkness where Smelt is waiting. Smelt with his knife and probably a gun too, and I've got no idea what to do, no idea at all, except I know one thing. I can't do nothing. Nothing is not an option. And so in box 4A, we have part of our solution. We know that Homer decides he's not going to do nothing, which means he is going to do something. So in box 4A, we would write, Homer decides that he's not going to do nothing. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4B. And for the evidence from the text, we would write down, except I know one thing. I can't do nothing. Nothing is not an option. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, describe Homer's inner conflict. How does he try to solve it? Okay, and so you would go back into the problem that Homer has, and in 4A, how he tries to solve it.